Welcome to this Telit Cinterion webinar. We are talking about the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark, Navigating Compliance for IoT. I'm Amanda Flink, the head of global events here at Telit Cinterion, and I will be moderating today. I am pleased to be joined by Enrico Milanese, our head of product security at Telit Cinterion, who will walk us through our topic today. Now, just before I hand it over to Enrico to start our presentation, I do have just a few quick reminders. We will have time to answer some questions at the end of the presentation. You can simply submit a question by posting in that questions box, which should be located near the bottom of your screen here. Also, take a second to check out our resources section for some additional information. There you can find today's slide deck and a few other resources related to this topic. And finally, we will send out that replay link to all attendees at the conclusion of the webinar, so be on the lookout for that. And with that, Enrico, I will hand it over to you to start our presentation today.
Thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone. This is Enrico Milanese speaking. I'm really happy to be here today and talking about US Cyber Trust Mark. In Telit, I'm in charge of product security topics inside the global R&D department. So let's try to start this session directly on the topic. So what we are going to see today and regarding the US Trust Mark program, we tried to introduce the labeling program in the US, and we are trying also to try to provide a different angle of interpretation, let me say, for this program from the manufacturer point of view, and the users, which are the benefits, and having a high-level overview regarding and exploring regulatory challenges and how this program can be beneficial for the different stakeholders, and especially in the supply chain and the procurement aspect in the manufacturer, from the manufacturer point of view. So the adoption of IoT technology is accelerating across industries, driving innovation, operational efficiencies. However, this growth also bring greater cybersecurity risk that can impact not just individual products, but could affect entire business models. For this reason, US government introduced this Cyber Trust Mark, which is a clear sign to manage this kind of risk. So security is now a market differentiator. This is a voluntary labeling program managed by the FCC, and this main aim is to help consumers, and I would say also by extension enterprise buyers, in order to identify secure IoT products. So it could help buyers and in all the entities in the supply chain to make more informed decisions regarding the final product and the cybersecurity topics within the product itself. So from another point of view, from the executive point of view, from the C-level, this means that product security is not just a technical concern, but we can, let me say, define it as a strategic lever for market access and brand trust. At the same time, and We will discuss more in detail in the next slides. Measures like the NDAA Section 1260H are reshaping supply chains and procurement strategies. So federal agencies are increasingly demanding transparencies and compliance, not just in the software, but also in the hardware sourcing. So we will deep dive more in detail later on. So what is exactly the US cyber trust mark? Let's define some more details. So as mentioned before, is a voluntary cybersecurity labeling program for consumer IoT devices managed by the FCC. So its purpose is to help consumers and enterprise buyers to identify products that meet robust cybersecurity standards. More or less, we can approach as a similarity with how the Energy Star label signals energy efficiency. So devices like smart home appliances, routers, cameras that meet cybersecurity requirement can display a shield logo and a QR code. Scanning this code, end users can retrieve and can be informed correctly regarding the security details of the specific product. This is a game changer for all the industry, I will say. Under the hood, the program is based on the technical criteria developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, the NIST, reusing a specific guideline that is the NIST 8425, the profile for IoT core baseline for consumer IoT program, which cover several IoT best practices from the technological and procedural point of view, like, for instance, how to manage credentials, authorization controls, automatic updates, data protection, and product security lifecycle management. So, what we can say regarding the final purpose of this initiative? First of all, I think one of the main aims is to increase the consumer confidence. So it can help buyers to make informed choices, knowing the device that are going to buy meet a baseline of cybersecurity standard that in the last decade, I would say, it was not so easy to communicate and to provide assurances. It can help to provide a new level of market differentiation. So manufacturers who can earn this mark can, let me say, stand out from the other competitors, demonstrating a commitment, a real commitment to the security and to the compliances, and to protect correctly the data of their final customers. Moreover, I think is also a regulatory alignment. So this program aligns with broader US cybersecurity strategies and may influence future procurement requirements for federal agencies. But going deeper, how the program is structured and how a manufacturer can start this evaluation. So, first of all, there is a preparation phase. So, manufacturer must assess their IoT solution against the NIST cybersecurity guidelines, recommendation, requirement. As I said before, both from technological and procedural point of view, because one aspect, a really important aspect that is covered in the NIST as well as in other international regulation, and we can discuss later on, will include supported period, continuous security patching, and so on. So it's not just a matter of specific functionalities, technical functionalities in the product, but also is a comprehensive evaluation in the whole life cycle of the product. This is a really important part. Once the manufacturer has assessed the product, can engage the third-party testing. So the manufacturer can submit the product to one of the FCC-approved laboratories, so defined as a CLA, so that can perform the security testing and the documentation review. Once this phase is completed, and if the product meets the criteria required by the labeling scheme, the CLA authorizes the usage of the Cyber Trust Mark label. The label includes a QR code that links to a registry with product-specific security information that can be accessed by the end buyers to provide transparency. After that, there is also a post-market surveillance. So manufacturers after that phase can be subject to ongoing compliance checks and potential renewals to maintain the certification. This is more or less the high-level process, even if a recent report claiming from June of this year indicate that FCC is currently reviewing the proposed process, and this review follows increased attention and potentially national security concerns related to the accredited testing laboratories. So possible modification in the current approval workflow are being under discussion. So at the moment, all the stakeholders are strictly monitoring the potential evolution, but no further updates so far have been published. As mentioned at the beginning, let's try to deep dive on the NDAA Section 1260H. What is it? First of all, it is a provision in the US National Defense Authorization Act, which prohibits the US federal agencies from buying or using certain semiconductors or related products if they are made or manufactured by specific Eastern companies or their subsidiaries. The main purpose is to prevent federal agencies in the US from contracting with entities in this list or using products containing their components. This is a crucial aspect that I would like to clarify. The restriction applies not only to the company explicitly named in the list maintained and listed by the 1260H, but also to all the products that incorporate such components, such as hardware modules, chips, and so on, of these entities, even if the final product is branded or assembled by a US-based company. As I mentioned, this point I think is critically important to highlight because from a cybersecurity supply chain perspective, this could introduce several implications for the end manufacturers and within the stakeholders in the value chain. First of all, this implies formal processes and procedures to assess, monitor the supply chain in the final product, assess and maintain an updated inventory of the asset, and enforce specific policies to oblige this mandate. That in a broader and complex organization, there are several challenges in order to satisfy correctly this requirement. And this activity can be crucial, both from manufacturer's side as well as from the final buyers and related supply chain processes. So this is, I think, an important topic to highlight and to clarify. So, compliance strategies for IoT manufacturers. So, we try to, let me say, categorize in these three areas. So, the component due diligence, security by design, and lifecycle management. So, component due diligence, as we started discussing as the previous slide, is a critical aspect to enforce. So, federal customers and agencies must avoid those suppliers to remain compliant. So, starting from June 2026, if I remember correctly, the Department of Defense will be prohibited from entering into direct contract with listed companies. And later on in 2027, the prohibition will extend also to indirect procurement. This means that every device that meets and should meet cybersecurity requirement, the presence of a restricted component in its supply chain could be a real risk because can be disqualified for such kind of markets. So, NDAA compliance is primarily relevant for US federal contractors, as we mentioned before, but let me say, is not directly applicable to consumer IoT products. This is something to be clarified. However, the risk associated with banned vendors in the consumer IoT devices can, let me say, indirectly affect also the consumer space, especially in the context of trust, security, and regulatory trends. So I think it's important also for manufacturers and all the entities involved to manage correctly the risk for foreseeable changes in the regulations. So I think manufacturers should carefully monitor and apply the correct processes for the cyber supply chain risk management topics. So audit the supply chain to identify and assess this kind of risk in a broader risk management scenario. I think is a must-have. Screen suppliers against the Section 1260H list. And one of the topics that probably we discuss later on regarding the benefit of this labeling scheme is to document the cybersecurity controls for the cyber trust mark in order to prepare for a potential gap analysis and reduce the risk for changes in the compliances, future compliances in the US market. Moreover, as we are seeing, there is a lot of movement in the worldwide IoT cybersecurity regulatory space. Manufacturers should prepare for future regulatory convergence where consumer and government standards may align more closely in the future. One topic that is really close to, let me say, my day-by-day activities is the security by design and the security by default, which is a mantra in the IoT cybersecurity space that is commonly used and discussed in several with several entities and several stakeholders. Let me just to point out some key elements. So everyone is aware of security by design and security by default approaches. The CISA also recently promoted several papers and joint work in the industry. So is a path that, especially in the embedded world, I would say is a mandatory requirement. And let me explain a little bit better. So, security by design promotes foundational principles to ensure resiliency, safety, and trustworthiness of the data and within the product provided by manufacturers. Multiple international frameworks are strongly demanding security by design and by default approaches in the final devices. And this is, I think, especially focused also on the final and in the embedded world, in the IoT world, because security by design cannot be, let me say, retrofitted at the end of the product development. It must be embedded since the very beginning to ensure that every layer of the system is resilient and compliant with evolving international standards. When the security is treated as an afterthought, added later in development cycle, it typically introduces higher remediation cost as a vulnerability is discovered post-deployment or already in the field are far more expensive to be fixed. And beyond the financial implication, manufacturers expose themselves to potential legal liability issues, or especially in sectors where there is a strict safety and data protection regulation. This is another important aspect. And last but not least, I think, especially in this world where the final IoT devices are not just pure software, there is not just the firmware component, but also the hardware configuration concur to the final cyber risk of the product. So security configuration at hardware level, such as, for instance, secure boot, hardware root of trust, must be designed and implemented since the beginning and cannot be added later on without redesigning the system or create specific new hardware and software variant that results in increasing production and maintenance cost. Products already in the field without specific security functionality that involve hardware changes cannot be fixed with a simple firmware update. And this increases the complexity and increase the cost, operational cost, and several collateral activities that the manufacturer needs to take into account. So the security by design approach, I think, that does not reduce only the regulatory risk, but also enforce the overall security posture of the product. And having this security by design in mind is, I think, is no longer an optional. It's a regulatory mandate and a safeguard for the end users and for the final buyers. And I think is a must-have to be included in every project, embedded project, since the beginning, involving all the stakeholders that concur to the creation of the final product. One other last, I think, important topic is the life cycle management, where promote and guarantee security in a whole product life cycle is a critical and complex aspect that several international regulation are also demanding. So is life cycle management starts at the beginning with the initial design and development, but goes after the product is put on the market, is deployed, it starts the maintenance phase, it includes eventual decommissioning phase with a continuous focus of security patches and safeguarding against evolving threat. So this is another clear and important topic that includes and involves several aspects of the product, which is not just technical measures, but can include topics of the clear period of support, how often regular patches and security patches are provided, secure onboarding, secure decommissioning. So it is a broader process to take into account. So once deployed, IoT devices must support secure update mechanisms to patch vulnerabilities and to adapt to the new evolving threat landscape and new attack vectors. So it includes also aspect and procedural aspect for vulnerability disclosure processes inside the company, manufacturer company, include aspect of firmware signing and firmware secure update for verify authenticity and integrity of those updates. So without these capabilities, devices become increasingly exposed over the time, especially from attackers that can, or threat actors that can target legacy systems. So these practices not just can meet regulatory or labeling expectation, but also can increase and build consumer trust and resilience. And I think the US trust mark can better highlight these aspects to the end users and to the final buyers. So strategies and recommendation for the IoT manufacturers. I think we can highlight that, for instance, the adoption of the cyber trust mark can support the business, especially for products also with a global variant, or products that can position it also outside the US market, for instance, in Europe or also in other regions. In Europe, for instance, the upcoming Cyber Resilience Act shares multiple security requirements with the NIST IoT security guidelines in terms of security by design, vulnerability management lifecycle, secure update, transparency through the documentation, just to mention a few. So I think also the cyber trust mark involves in the process external third-party testing and security assess the posture of the device based on the NIST guidelines. And this, let me say, this additional effort, because it's not just a self-assessment. So as a manufacturer, I need to go through to an external independent laboratory to assess my device. So this also, I think, is value added, and this additional effort can help to reach CRA requirements or other regulatory requirements, and can significantly reduce the time to market or the market entry in other regions. I think this is an important topic to highlight. Another aspect is the transparency. As we discussed briefly before, this capability to provide more information and to the end user through this QR code that links and open a detailed cybersecurity information page. This QR code can be printed usually on the product label, and can be directly used by the buyers, by the end users, detailing this device security features, the update policies, the vulnerability handling procedures of the manufacturers, compliance status, and so on and so forth. So I think for the end users, the QR code provides an immediate access to transparent information related to product specific security details. I think is a game changer, as we highlighted before. As we briefly discussed with the energy label sector, I think for the end user and consumers will be really beneficial in a simple terms to make a clear communication and a differentiator between the different product. So they allow the end user to make more informed decision, enhance the trust in the product, and help the users to understand how their data and how their device are protecting their data, their end user information during the time. And again, I think this is a really important step, especially in this period for the IoT cybersecurity generic posture, I would say. On the other way around, maybe we can comment also from the manufacturer standpoint. So as a manufacturer, the QR code could serve as a compliance tool, I would say, and a really strong communication channel direct to the end users. It simplifies the process, demonstrating compliance to cybersecurity standard. It demonstrates life cycle security practices, and I think from the manufacturer standpoint can be beneficial primarily for the US market, but I think can be beneficial also for products that can be sold also in other regions. So overall, I think this is my personal opinion, is the approach has several benefits for the end users, the manufacturers, and I think it really create added value to all the relevant stakeholders in the value chain. Another topic, as mentioned before, regarding the supply chain with the focus on NDAA risk. IoT manufacturers, this approach does not only ensure smoother compliance with the federal procurement rules, but also I think can be beneficial to strengthen the product's integrity and resilience. So I think are strictly bound, let me say, this between strategic sourcing and having a clear visibility of the requirements, cybersecurity requirements, with an independent evaluation from the laboratories. So, more deep dive from another, let me say, angle on the same topic. In the US, federal space agencies are now required by the MIMO M2218 and the NIST guidance to maintain a comprehensive IoT device inventories and ensure they do not deploy not compliant devices. So the focus on supply chain is has increased dramatically in the last 10, 15 years, I would say, because I think the stakeholders highlighted the need to enforce new paradigms, I would say, due to the broader complexity of the topic. And I think this is something that provides real benefit to the security posture of the agencies, of the final end users, both in the consumer and in the B2B, in the B2B world. But returning back to the point of the specific use cases of the agencies, having an inventory of the connected devices and assess their security posture and verify the alignment with the federal cybersecurity standards, because if the device does not meet these standards, especially with untrusted supply chains, or lacking of security by the design features, should be excluded from the federal network. So real IoT manufacturers in this space, in this vertical market, are mandated with strong incentives to align with the framework like US Cyber Trust Mark. So also by proactively certifying devices and maintaining transparent regarding the security posture through documentation, vendors can position themselves as a trusted partner, as a trusted supplier, not just for the government or government agencies, but also for enterprises. And the consumer market is increasingly influenced by federal policies. So I think in the upcoming years, I suppose there will be also a potential shift of influence also in the consumer world. Takeaways. So we clarified what is US Cyber Trust Mark. We discussed the angle of supply chain, which is, let me say, a slightly different angle to discuss within the labeling, the US labeling scheme, that I think is not highlighted sufficiently. But getting back to the main point, the main aim of the US trust mark, which is visibility, transparency, and direct communication to the end users. And I think they make a great design. So especially with a simple scan of a QR code, final end users and buyers can get instant access to the information, and reducing the friction of communication friction, lack of communication processes and so on. So they create immediate trust. I think this is one of the key points. Create immediate trust in the buyer. And so also reducing several costs for the manufacturer processes in terms of technical support, reducing costly returns of the product. So this is the key point, and I think it will be really beneficial for for the IoT consumer space. But I think that the impact goes beyond the consumer. The certification aligns with global standard, as we highlighted briefly in this the previous slide, and could help to achieve other international certification smoothly, and the path into regulated market can also reduce the friction of compliance and time to market. So for companies that and enterprises that aim enterprise and government contracts, the trust mark, I think, becomes a strategic asset. Readiness for procurement environment where security is no longer an optional, but is expected. Recent statistic from McKinsey report, the 60% of IoT buyers prioritize the cybersecurity elements, while almost 1/3 of the enterprises identify it as a barrier to adoption. These are really interesting numbers. So certification serves not only as a standard requirement, but can discriminate products in the market and may contribute to business growth. I think is one of the other angles to see this program. So what manufacturer should evaluate in the near future is for sure to align product roadmap with the NIST IoT cybersecurity recommendation, start evaluating and assess potential gaps, and not only, and I will stress about this, not only from a technical perspective. It's not just a matter of security functionality, but it's a comprehensive view that includes procedural aspects, as mentioned before. It's not an R&D issue. It's a product management topic. It's a company level topic, because involves several aspects of the product. This could be beneficial, especially for manufacturers with a global footprint, as I mentioned before, due to the complexity in the IoT regulatory landscape. Most of the requirements listed in the NIST recommendation, as I mentioned before, are aligned with other regions' regulations. So there is a huge overlap in this space. For sure, there is a gap to fix from technical and procedural aspect, but most of the requirements can be, or most areas can be covered also with NIST guidelines. And audit supply chains to identify and assess the supply chain risk as a broader risk in a risk management scenario, to align current and potential future applicability for within the section 1260H, list, is it something that should be discussed at C-level in every manufacturer company? Yeah, anyway, at the end, I think the cyber trust mark isn't just a simple labeling program, I will say, but I think is a critical step in the direction to enforce trust, transparency, readiness, and opportunity for multiple stakeholders in the value chain to increase the bar and provide a real value added services for the end users. So these were my thoughts regarding the US Cyber Trust Mark. I don't know from the forum if there are any comments or questions.
Yes, thanks, Enrico. We've actually gotten several questions, and audience, still time to ask a question if you'd like to submit still. Really quick, just before we get to those, I am going to drop a poll on your screen, audience. If you would like to have one of our experts contact you one-on-one, please respond here on the poll and we will have somebody reach out to you directly. Enrico, we've gotten several questions here, so I'm just going to dive right in. This first one states, as a final device manufacturer with multiple products and global market variants, what are the business advantages of obtaining this US Cyber Trust mark?
Yeah. So first of all, as this is my personal opinion, it enhances consumer trust and brand reputation by signaling that your products meet rigorous cybersecurity standards. So the trust mark has the benefit that is recognizable directly by the consumers with the logo and QR code that can provide transparencies and, let me say, can allow end users to easily access security information and feel more confident, I would say, in their purchasing decision. So is it something that this is especially valuable in a competitive consumer market that where security is can be seen as a differentiator, a real differentiator. So this is something that as a primary aim. On the other way around, I see that, as I mentioned, IoT manufacturers can leverage this labeling scheme also for other markets outside the US. So in the terms of credibility, attestation, even if was primarily focused for the US market, I think can be a business enabler in other regions, due to also the fact that leveraging the NIST guidelines that are recognized worldwide from different stakeholders, and can be seen at, let me say, can help a manufacturer to achieve other international regulations, as like the Cyber Resilience Act, just or others, and can help in the compliance process, because several requirements are real in overlapping. So can help, really help in the compliance with multiple jurisdictions and regions, accelerating the time to market and reducing the complexity of other regulatory requirement and processes. Last part, maybe I think more strategic is more related from the business perspective as a competitive advantage, I would say. So distributors, retailers, and then I think also enterprise buyers are refining their supply chain procedures, procurement procedures, and they are inserting specific KPIs in their vendor selection or prioritization in the vendor list. So demonstrate proactive cybersecurity practices. I think that can achieving also the US trust mark can streamline procurement processes and reducing potentially due diligence overhead and positioning the company in a more security conscious partner that, as I said before, multiple entities are introducing barriers in their procurement processes. This is my take on this.
Yeah, great. This next question is a good one. Is there a risk of consumer confusion between voluntary and mandatory cybersecurity labels? And the example they used here was CRA.
Yes, this is an interesting question. Well, I think generally speaking, I don't think there is a real risk, but let me comment further on this. So the Cyber Trust Mark, first of all, and the Cyber Resilience Act are quite different. The first is a labeling, volunteering program for the consumer IoT devices. So the scope is also different. The Cyber Resilience Act is a mandatory regulation in Europe, and the scope and the perimeter is related to all digital products must meet strict cybersecurity standard. So is much really broader. I think the approaches are, of course, quite different between the two, but the final aim is the same, is to increase cybersecurity awareness and enforce cybersecurity requirement on the final product. The aim is the same. What I can say, I think that manufacturers, especially with a global footprint, probably they need a clear communication to their customers to promote and highlight the different approaches between a voluntary and a mandatory labels in order to increase the awareness within the consumer world, in order to promote, disseminate, and leverage also, for instance, the previous activities in the US trust mark as, let me say, as a differentiator, and to provide the correct information to the end users. So, generally speaking, I don't think there is confusion, but probably we need to, as manufacturers, to provide the correct information to the end buyers, IoT in the IoT consumer space for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. Maybe we'll take just one more question. And actually, I have two pretty similar, so I'll kind of mix them together here. This says, will future US regulations make the cyber trust mark mandatory? And sort of a follow on, should we prepare for a transition from voluntary to mandatory?
Tough question. Let me say, I think we can say that there is a recent executive order signed in June of this year, if I remember correctly, that starting from 2027, all the IoT devices procured by the US federal agencies must be certified under the Trustmark program. And while this program is applied only to federal procurement, this could be seen as a precedent that could potentially expand, like a ripple effect on the private sector. And maybe we can try to make a comparison between other standards in the Energy Star. Once the label became a requirement for the government contracts, private sector later on, and the buyers often follow it. Okay. On this topic, I think could be an option to be implemented as mandatory in the upcoming years, especially in specific IoT consumer sectors. But let me rephrase and let me see this question from another angle. As manufacturers, I think we need to prepare for a transition in a mandatory compliance. That could be seen as a strategic investment that could reduce the future regulatory risk and enhance the product credibility in the cybersecurity, from the cybersecurity standpoint, and could also potentially open to new markets in government or enterprise sectors as well. So I think that could be an important investment area where manufacturers should take into account as a strategic position in order to gain a competitive advantage. It's quite difficult to provide an easy answer to this question, but let me say should be really carefully evaluated from the manufacturer's point of view as a strategic investment.
Yeah, I think that's a great breakdown. At least gives our audience, a lot of points to think about. I believe that's a good place to wrap up. We are hitting the hour here. Enrico, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. And again, check out that resource section for some additional information. And join us for the next one. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Have a good one.